welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, and today's guest, Dr. I almost said it wrong, almost, Mark, he is joining us, Mark Halperin. That's right, Dr. Mark Halperin is joining us to talk about a revolution that is taking place. No, it has absolutely nothing to do with any of the other revolutions that you may have heard of in the news media, either in the present time or going back, I don't know, what is it, 240, 250 years, something like that? No, nothing to do with those revolutions. This is one in which we are going to, I'll put it in our vernacular, change the world for the better for everyone. Make it a good place, a better place. Because even today, it's not horrible. It's not a place where, where's the rocket ship? I got to get on board and get out of here. No. We can make this a better place. And Dr. Mark Halperin, thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
And just to dispel any connections there, no relation to Stephen Halpern. I'd like to call him the metaphysical musician. Creates some incredible music.
I will be looking him up after the show for sure, because I've never heard of him.
We've had him on the program a time or two, and really enjoyed meeting him and talking with him, considering I've been listening to his music for probably more than 40 years. So wow. I still have the albums. I'm talking about the vinyl from the 70s and early 80s. So got some antiques, I guess you'd call them by now. I'm not sure how old something has to be before. I have an appraiser friend who could tell me that.
Yes.
The Coherence Revolution, as you call it, finding flow in your journey to the present moment. I want to share a quick analogy that I came up with some years ago. I've been doing audio editing for, over 40 years. I've been in the business for over 40 years. But when it came down to doing it on the computer, it gave a beautiful representation of the past, present, and future. And I'm sure you've seen audio on a screen. You've seen it being recorded. And you see that little line that kind of flutters right there in that one spot as the wave is created. On the left side of the line, where the wave is being created, is the past. It's already happened. On the right side of that line is the future. Nothing's been written yet. It's at that line, that demarcation spot. That's the present moment. And that is what you're talking about in terms of getting us to that present moment. So the first question I have for you is to define some terms. What is coherence?
Well, I think we all understand coherence in our own way, but coherence is balance. Coherence is being in the flow. And so in a very basic way, if you're an athlete and you've said that you're in the zone, well, that's in coherence. You mean time slows down, everything is just functioning the way it should be. Your body's functioning at 100%. Other people might recognize coherence, when you walk in a room and there's someone across the way that you just feel attracted to go and speak to that person. There's some type of coherent rhythm or sync between the two of you. But what I'm really talking about in the book is physiological coherence, and it's a state of balance, and it's a state of being in an uplifted, renewed state. And we do that with getting our heart rhythm. It's about getting your heart and brain entrained to the same frequency. And what happens is our heart is approximately 40 times stronger than the brain's electrically. And so in the body, as in the world, a smaller wave will take on a bigger wave. And so what that means is that, if you're in an ocean, a bigger wave will take on a smaller wave. And so in our body, if our heart is the strongest frequency, then it will entrain the brain's frequency. And so when you start getting your heart rhythm into a coherent sine wave, a nice rhythm, it starts to entrain the parts of the brain that deal with decision making, that deal with stress, that deals with pain and immune function, and all of the higher brain functions. And so the idea is when you're in this coherent state, This is when your digestive system is in sync with the rest of your rhythms. It's when your cells are literally all vibrating and buzzing at the same frequency, and it's when you're at your absolute best. And so the idea is, we're not usually in coherence. Most of us are incoherent most of the day, and we're not making good decisions, and we're feeling overwhelmed, and we're not responding to our environment in an appropriate way. So by getting into a physiological coherent state, you can start to make better decisions, have better interactions, better relationships, better outcomes, and really deal with stress and overwhelm. And that's really what this is about.
Now, you have a connection with the organization called HeartMath. It's been a long time since we've had them on the program, their representatives, and I need to get in touch with them to do that. But tell me about your connection with them, because obviously when I first saw Coherence Revolution, I'm thinking, gee, there's a global coherence
That's right.
organization with HeartMath. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the two places that really got I was educated on coherence was through HeartMath and through Dr. Joe Dispenza, who does a lot of work with HeartMath on coherence. And I started with the tools and techniques and biofeedback equipment of HeartMath way back in around 2005. But at that point, it was really just something I was trying for anxiety, because I suffered with so much anxiety that I was trying everything at the time. And I tried HeartMath a little bit, but I didn't really get it. I didn't embody it. And maybe 5 or 6 years later, 2010, 2011, I really started getting into HeartMath and being able to utilize it in my own life. And several years later, I became a certified a HeartMath practitioner. And so back in 2019, 2020, as just before the pandemic, I had been wanting to start to teach HeartMath to people. And I saw online that there was someone who was a teacher, someone who was experienced, and they had some openings in their class and said, even if you're a certified practitioner, if you want to learn from me, then, come on board. So I decided to take that. And it turns out that the person that was delivering the course his name was Bruce Cryer. And Bruce was the ex-CEO of HeartMath. And he had, for his own reasons and health issues and his journey, he had not worked for HeartMath for a few years as their CEO. And he was looking to sort of get back into this type of work. And we just hooked up. And afterwards I said, I think we have a good connection and I think we resonate with each other. And so he came on as a partner for Coherence Revolution with me. And he's been really helping guide the two of us together, have really created this process of the Coherence Revolution, which at the very heart of it, pun intended, is HeartMath. In the 6-week online course, we dive into all kinds of concepts about how to create coherence. But each week we learn new HeartMath techniques. And so by the end of the 6 weeks, you've learned this practical technique of how to self-regulate your emotional response, but we're also diving into our senses, the sense of smell, taste, sight, sound. All of these things can produce coherence if you delve in and figure out what works for you. And that's really what the course is about, is figuring out what works for you.
Mm. And that's a key right there. What works for you? There is no one size fits all. And I know, too, that there are institutions in this world that kind of want to push that one size fits all. One of them is the medical community. And then the other, from my perspective, is the philosophical, or some would call it the religious community that says, oh, no, there's only one path. There's only one way to get there. And this is the way that you go. And that never made any sense to me. It just was illogical. Forgive the Vulcan vernacular there. But I'd like to see more people realize that there is more to this life than what we've been told. Did it take a while for you to sort of break away from the institutional, what we might call programming? That has been out there, obviously, for a long, long time, to go your own way. Did that come fairly easily for you, or was that a challenge? Was there even more anxiety there?
Yeah. Well, by the time I was in my late teens, I'm now 50, and my journey with this really started when I was in my late teens. Anxiety was fairly bad, and I developed anxiety over my teen years. And by the time I was 18, I was already reading books on philosophy, but I was also a very good student and very scientific. And I always had sort of this both sides of me. And my approach as early as 18, 19 years old was to essentially try everything I could to figure out what my anxiety was. And my approach was, I'm going to eventually figure it out, and then I'll be fine and I'll live the rest of my life without anxiety. And so I tried every Western based approach you could imagine and every sort of alternative approach. I mean, I had tried medications, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, I saw psychiatrists, psychologists, all of those. But I also did homeopathy and naturopathy and chiropractic. And I also went to energy healers, and I went to people who worked with the quantum, and I worked with people who do past life regression. And I mean, really, I did it all. I read all the books, and I went to a million different types of treatments, therapies, this, that, and the other. And so for me, it was just this constant discovery and figuring out what would work. And, inevitably, every time I started something new, it felt encouraging. I had hope, and I felt, okay, this is going to be it. And then 2-3 months would go by, and they'd say it's going to take a little bit of time. And then a little bit of time would go by, and now I'd start feeling a little bit disappointed in, didn't matter what method it wasn't working. And so I kind of went by the wayside. And, my transformation has been about 5, 6, 7 years in the making of really diving into heart math and some of these concepts. But what pulled it all together, ironically, was the pandemic. Because on March 15th of 2020, we were about to open up our clinic. We had just done a renovation. And when we went in, the government basically locked us down, and we were told to go home for an indeterminate amount of time. And I realized with my experience, I wouldn't be good with the uncertainty of going home and not knowing when I could practice, when I could work again, how my family was going to do. And so I just decided I was going to turn this into a positive. And so I went through every course, every book, everything that I'd ever done for anxiety, all the books that I had, turned over, those little pages that one day I would come back to. Well, these were the days that I was doing that. So I went back and I went through everything. And what ended up coming out of it was the book, because I just started writing what worked and what didn't work. I wrote down my journey. And I realized that this book would be a great companion to be able to teach heart math and to teach people some of these concepts. And that's how I designed the 6-week course. So it really has been an evolution to a revolution, eventually, because it was everything that had worked for me, everything that hadn't worked for me, and then really simplifying it so that I could put it into a process that if people go into the process and take their time and go into each aspect, they can figure out for themselves how to create this coherent process and be able to put themselves in a coherent state on a daily basis.
We are talking with Dr. Mark Halperin about the Coherence Revolution, finding flow in your journey to the present moment. And you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for staying with us here on the program. This is a program designed with new paradigms for a new world as we give you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And Mark's revolution, his Coherence Revolution, seeks to initiate dramatic change by creating a fundamentally new way of being for millions around the world. We might put a B on that, Doc, and call it billions, because we're fast approaching, if not already there, to the 8 billion mark. And it's free of fear, negative, and mind chatter. Boy, there you go. That's a big one for a lot of folks, myself included. Self-destructive patterns, relationship woes, financial struggles, and a whole lot more. And because you can only create a dream life from a place of coherence. And that's something that we talk about here, about giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true. That's really what we're looking at doing, is taking the dreams that we have. They're coming from somewhere, those desires, those impulses for pursuing a particular vocation, if you will, career. I heard this one country song that says, find something you love to do and call it work. And I was thinking, why would I call it work if it's something I love to do? A vocation I like better. And it gives that impetus, if you will, that perspective of hey, I'm good. I'm having a great time and I'm not planning on stopping what I'm doing. When you worked through this whole aspect of the anxiety and so forth, and I guess I should ask you, really, have you finally gotten through that tunnel, if you will? Have you broken through to the other side yet, or do you still deal with and need to use some of these modalities to sort of I don't know if the word is manage or cope with the anxieties that you've had for a better part of your life?
Well, I would say a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. In other words, um, as you start to change your neurological set point, and I think one of the concepts that hit me so hard is that anxiety is almost like an addiction. Because as your brain starts ruminating on different stressors, you start producing chemicals. And those chemicals are stress hormones that end up producing anxiety. And as you produce more anxiety, you produce more fearful thoughts, which produce more chemicals, which produce more anxiety. And it becomes this cycle. And your body, for lack of a better explanation, is getting used to the release of those chemicals. And eventually they start to almost crave them. And so you'll notice that people who suffer with anxiety, once they get rid of one problem or one perceived problem, their brain searches their environment or their life for other problems to worry about, essentially so that they can get the same chemical release and get the same adrenal rush. And they're just worrying about other things now. And so the idea is that most people have a neurological set point for stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And as you start to use techniques like heart math or the other techniques I use in my book, it's really about creating a new set point and creating a new emotional set point. And so by practicing these techniques and by practicing heart math, what you're doing is you're practicing the emotions that you want to feel. And as you start to practice them, your body gets more used to creating those chemicals. And as you get used to producing those chemicals, you start to create a new set point for stress and your emotional life. And so for me, over time, there have been triggers or anxiety producing occasions that no longer affect me. They're gone. Mm-hmm. But there are some that still do trigger me. But the difference is now when it's a trigger that might be 30 years old, maybe it happened from something when I was in my teens or in my 20s, instead of it lasting for hours, days, and weeks of anxiety, I now have a toolbox that anxiety can be a few minutes, or I can change it to a different emotional state at will. And that's really what it's about, is taking charge, because most of us are not going to get rid of every stressor we've ever had. I would love to get through all of my anxiety and never deal with it ever again. But I don't see that as my goal now. What I see as a goal is to create a process in my life where I'm waking up every day and I'm achieving the emotional states that I'd like to set out for myself. And that's one thing we talk about in the program, is that when you create a daily schedule for yourself, you don't only create a schedule for the things you want to do, you actually have an idea of the emotions that you want to feel during different times of the day, so that you can have a toolbox of things to help you achieve it. So for instance, in the morning, if you wake up anxious or stressed like I used to, what are the things that you can have ready in the morning? Whether it's a diffuser with a certain smell that might uplift you for the day. Maybe there's certain clothes that put you in a certain mood. Maybe there's something visual. Maybe there's something auditory. And the idea is that you use the world around you to start to change your emotional state, because the morning emotional state might be different from lunch, might be different from the evening, might be different from the night. And so you develop this toolbox. You know that you can use these smells at different times of the day, and these visual landscapes or different things to look at, different types of sounds and music, different foods, different people. How do you use the world around you to change your emotional state? And for me, the most powerful of those was heart math, which is a technique that I can use in the moment, and it can shorten almost any emotional response I have, and or a negative emotional response, and it can make me, or I can choose a renewing emotion and start to feel it. And that's the power of learning these things. Is it's not about getting rid of anything. It's about setting a new set point for yourself emotionally.
Dr. Mark Halperin is my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for the opportunity to come into wherever you are. I was going to say come into your ears, But we can also come in through your eyes because we're on YouTube. That's right. We have a channel called Tell Me Your Story, and it's Richard Dugan. There's another one up there somewhere. I've seen it, but this guy does not wear a black hat. I hope he doesn't start because there'll be such confusion. But then again, he'll also have to grow a beard. And we hope that you'll go to that channel and you will find us because our banner is the Decade of Perfect Vision, where we encourage you to go within. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we continue talking with Dr. Mark Halperin here about the Coherence Revolution. Has there been, well, actually, let me back that question out first and ask you, what has your anxiety taught you?
Well, I mean, what anxiety tells me is that most of us have built up energies within our body that need to be released. It's always about energy and about being able to get rid of that energy. It's always stuck and stagnant. And so for me, it's what I realized with the anxiety is that it's not a thing that has to be there. In other words, I was told years ago by many, many therapists, it will take you months or years to get rid of this anxiety. Just do all of this work and you can get rid of it. And what I've learned about anxiety is you can get rid of anxiety in seconds if you're doing the right things. Mm-hmm. You know, imagine yourself at home. I'm not sure whether you or any of your listeners have been at home and you are upset, you're miserable, maybe you're crying, maybe you're having a panic attack, but things aren't good. Mm-hmm. And then someone knocks on your door and you've got to get yourself together to go answer that door. Most people, they summon up enough energy and they go to the door and they, wipe their tears, they tighten up their shirt, whatever they got to do, but they're in a state that they can answer the door. They open the door and whoever's there, they're not feeling anxiety in that moment. They're present with that person. And so what they do is they engage with them. And maybe there's a little thing in the back of their head saying, God, I wish this person would go away because I want to go back and break down again. Mm-hmm. But if they're honest with themselves in that 30 seconds, they're not feeling depressed or anxious. They're in the moment and they're right there. And so you can get rid of the anxiety almost immediately when you summon up enough energy. And to me, it's about what can you do to get rid of it and summon up enough of a response that's greater than the response that you're having. And so, in my book, I talk a lot about the extreme sports that I've done. And most people say, well, doesn't that cause you more anxiety? And my response is always, well, I was already anxious. So I felt like I was jumping out of a plane every day, or I was about to write my final exam or jump off a cliff or whatever analogy you want to use. And so when I was doing actually jumping out of an airplane or jumping off a cliff or going scuba diving with sharks or whatever it wasn't because I was looking for the adrenal rush. For me, it was about getting into the moment. And those things were very powerful at putting you in the moment, because the only time I never felt anxiety was when I was in the moment. If I was thinking about the future, I was anxious. If I was thinking about the past, I was depressed. But if I was right there engaged, I felt no anxiety. And so I searched out things that I could do to put me in the moment. And what I realized over years is that I didn't have to do all those extreme things, even though I like them. Things like heart math, things like different music, things like painting, things like reading, things like getting in a good conversation with someone where you're listening and you're engaged. Again, personally, I don't feel anxiety when I am fully in the moment. And so that's why the book is called, Your Journey to the Present Moment, because most people are looking at this destination of where they want to go. And it's this destination mindset. And most people have this I'll be happy when attitude, right? I'll be happy when I get my first job, my spouse, my house, enough money, whatever it is, I'll be happy when. Yeah. But how about now? When are you actually going to be happy? And so what I talk about is having a process mindset, because if you're always in the process of creating coherence, creating joy, creating love, creating appreciation, then you're in the moment and you're creating an uplifting, renewing sense rather than a foreboding, uncertain sense, which is what most people have. Yeah.
I have to say that I find it fascinating when I start taking a look, for example, at the word coherence, to be coherent, to be understood, One of the definitions that I have here is the integration of diverse elements, relationships, or values, as well as systemic or logical connection or consistency. And the reason I bring those up is because I notice there's a lack of coherence in so many of our institutions, governmental, political. It's as if they come up with an idea, no matter how harebrained it might be, and they think, well, because I hold this particular position in this institution, my idea is a great idea. But there's been no thought as to how to implement it, who is going to implement it, how it's going to be created, by whom, and what it's really going to accomplish. What about, and not necessarily saying that now we got to do some environmental impact studies, but what's this going to do to the environment around it, whatever it is? It could be very localized, like right here in my studio. Or maybe it's something larger that how's this going to affect my community, my state, my country, or the planet? And they don't think about the intended as well as the unintended consequences, and so forth and so forth and so on. And I guess what I really am looking at in particular is and using this as an example, Mark, this whole conversation about getting rid of petroleum-based products and fuels, and the position some are taking against getting rid of them. And it's like, well, they didn't think about the intended or unintended consequences when they started using petroleum or oil from the ground and then burning it. They didn't think about it in terms of spewing the smoke and the gases into the air. Well, we are now. And there are other alternatives. I don't know whether it's nuclear. And I don't consider that sustainable either, even though they say, well, initially when it's creating the energy, it's clean. Yeah, well, okay. If you want to stick to that story, I hope that you can live with it, because we can't live with the byproducts that are created after the fuel rods have been expended, although they are coming up with ways in which apparently they're able to reuse them in some fashion, or I don't know if they can recharge them or not, or if there's a way, I don't know. But anyway, but this is just one example. And I think, wait a minute, Tesla came up with a method of free energy. Well, certainly that flies in the face of the petroleum industry, of all of the utilities, and on and on and on. And it's like, well, yeah, but if you do away with that institution and all energy is free, then you don't. Then all these people that are working in the energy industry, they can go off and do other things. They can go off and create other things. It creates new opportunities, just like this pandemic created. And that's what I thought of. I don't know about you, Mark, but 2 years ago, when all of this started to unfold, even though we looked at it and said, oh, no, don't shut everything down. No, wait a minute, it's going to change our way of life and da-da-da. And of course, I believed that if we had done what we were asked to do, we would have been through it in 3 months. But we didn't. We refused as a population, said, no, I have the freedom to blah, blah, blah. Well, but I also looked at it as there are opportunities that are going to come our way we don't even know exist. Would you say that the anxieties that you've suffered throughout your life, what opportunities did that create for you?
Well, I mean, the anxiety that I have felt in my life, it's because up until, maybe about 5 or 10 years ago, it was really the guiding force. It guided a lot of my decisions, because there was things that I would want to do and not want to do because of the anxiety. And I found it very limiting. However, once I started getting into, as a chiropractor, and getting more into dealing with stress, it's opened up conversations with people that I deal with on a daily basis. In ways that I never imagined. Just, people coming in that you wouldn't think would express things to you. As soon as I started opening up my story to people started opening up to me. And this whole ability to start helping people on a whole other level, because I was a heart math certified trainer and I could get out there and deal with this with my patients, it's opened up a whole new world of how you can interact with people. And this, if I didn't suffer with anxiety, the chance of me going down this route of becoming a heart-centered person, of becoming a heart math certified trainer, being able to help people, inspire them and change their lives, that wouldn't have been my route, because I would not have been looking at things through that lens, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so I'm very grateful for what it's given me, because it's given me connections with people that aren't superficial. I believe that what it's done for me is increased my ability to connect with people and increase my ability to help people that are willing to listen. And, you started talking about people making decisions and not always making sense. What I like to bring it back to sort of heart math, because it's such a big part of my life now. Heart math works on three levels. One you mentioned at the beginning of the show, which is the Global Coherence Initiative. Mm-hmm. And it also works on a personal level. In other words, I can change my own physiological state. But it also works on a community level, so that if I get into coherence, my electromagnetic field, which can be measured several meters from my body, will interact with anybody else in my field, and you can help other people get more coherent. So, for instance, when I start a business meeting, I will lead some breath work where we all get a little bit more coherent together, and that now our decision process is much more efficient, and we're making better decisions as a group. And before I go and treat people, I get myself coherent so that then I can help to pass that on to others. And it's amazing how we actually have an effect on the people around us. I mean, HeartMath did this experiment with 4 people in cubicles, and 3 of them had heart sensors on, and they were instructed to get into heart coherence. The other one had a heart monitor on, but had no idea how to get into heart coherence. But as soon as the 3 of them got into heart coherence, within minutes, the 4th person's heart went right along with theirs and got right into a nice coherent rhythm, because the other 3, their electromagnetic field influenced the heart of that 4th person. Wow. And so this is happening all around us. And so once we understand how our energy influences those around us, we can start to affect not only our lives, but other lives. And so for me, anxiety has been a gift. I certainly didn't like the suffering I went through. I would like to have had less suffering, but I wouldn't trade it. In other words, I wouldn't be where I am right now in life. I wouldn't have the same relationship with my kids and with my family and with my patients and with my friends and family if it weren't for me diving into this type of work. That being the case, however, I don't think everybody needs to go down the route of suffering with anxiety for 30 years so that they can become a better person. I think that you can teach this stuff to kids at a very young age, because kids don't have the same hang-ups as adults. One of the things I talk to people about is something simple as smiling. Right? When you smile into a mirror, just the act of smiling stimulates endorphin release in the body. It's connected to your muscle contraction in your mouth. And so you have people go to a mirror and just start to smile, they actually start to feel better. But if I instruct my adult patients to go do that, there's a wall, there's an ego, there's something that prevents them from doing that. Whereas if you talk to a child, they don't have any of that. They're going to go to the mirror and start just doing silly faces and getting into it and having fun with it, because that's what kids do. And so you can start to teach these principles of how to get into coherence to kids at a very young age. And now they're growing up being heart-centered kids who are taking care of their community and the people around them. So I'm really encouraged of not only teaching this to adults and helping people who suffer with anxiety, but getting these tools out to kids who maybe aren't suffering yet. They haven't developed these patterns yet, and then hopefully they won't.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're talking with Dr. Mark Halperin, and we're talking about the Coherence Revolution, and we hope that you will get involved in that revolution. We'll find out why you should as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are so grateful for the insights from Dr. Mark Halperin as we continue talking about the Coherence Revolution. A fascinating thing. You can can go to coherencerevolution.com and find out more about the work that he is discussing here. The book is for people who believe that life has more to offer than they have the ability, and that they have the ability to become a better, even an exceptional version of themselves. I've often said this, Dr. Mark Halperin, that and I actually go to a biblical passage when I refer to the aspect of perfection. It says, be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I mused about that. I tried to understand that. And I pulled up a few Old Testament passages as well. And what came to me was this, that perfection had nothing to do with good, bad, right, wrong, left, right, black, white, etc., etc. It had to do with just being. I am that I am, it says in the Old Testament. And that's perfection. So I'm already perfect. But this isn't about just being perfect and just being in the present moment, because there's always room for improvement. I mean, we are evolving, we are transforming. Why do we go to school? I mean, why did you go to school, Doc? You wanted to pursue other things. You wanted to broaden your horizons, expand your capacity mentally, both mentally, physically, as well as emotionally and spiritually. And that's why we do the things that we do, to do that expansion, just as the universe has been expanding. Oh, by the way, side note, I saw a wonderful 30-minute video the other day about how the universe is eventually going to collapse in on itself and there'll be nothing left. However, don't get scared, folks. This is going to take trillions with a T of years. So just, relax. But I found it a fascinating conversation in this video. It was really interesting. Tell me about how one can begin the process of becoming a part of this coherence revolution. What is, let's say, the first step? Yeah, you can go to coherencerevolution.com. You can get yourself a copy of the book. That's obviously a great start. But let's say, hey, I like this interview. I like what the doc is saying. What can I do right now, this moment, to begin to become a part of this revolution, to affect change first in myself, that will then, I don't want to say infect, bad choice of words this time of year, this era, but to affect the people around me. They still have free will. That's another thing we could talk about as well. But to say, I want to encourage, to cajole, if you will. I don't want to coerce, all right? Yeah. I don't want to pressure, but I want to be an influence so that we can move from survival to thrival.
Yes. So, first of all, thank you for mentioning my website. What I've done for people on your show today, if you go to coherencerevolution.com/2022, we set up a special page. And if you go there, coherencerevolution.com/2022, you can download a copy of the ebook for free. So I want people to have this information. You can go there. There's a code. You can download the book. There's also a code to join the course at 50% off for our launch that's happening January 31st. And there's a couple of other start dates in February and March. So anybody that's listening can certainly do that for either half the price for the course or get the free ebook and just start getting into it at your own disposal. But, to answer your question a little bit more thoroughly, the first thing people have to do is really to admit to themselves that their life is a little bit more overwhelming, more stressful. They're not quite as much control as they'd like to be. Most people don't want to be diagnosed. They don't want more therapy. They don't want to go in and have more appointments and more doctors. That's not what this is about. This isn't therapy. This is about people just saying to themselves, I don't like the amount of overwhelm, the amount of stress that I experience. And I know there's more out there. I know that there's a better way to live. And so if you can take a moment and pause and just sort of say, that's the way I feel about my life. I know I can be a better version of myself. Well, then this type of work is really for you, because you're going to be able to dive in, and there's worksheets and workbooks and things, if you're doing the live course, you'll get coaching to go through it. But the first thing you have to do is just sort of take a pause and say, I actually think that I could be a better version of myself. And, as a very simple thing to do for people who are like, well, in the moment, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Just a very simple thing to do is to start practicing stomach breathing rather than chest breathing. Most people are chest breathers, and all they do is do short, shallow breaths where they breathe in and their chest is heaving upwards. That creates a stress response. You can't make good decisions when you're in that state. So if you just paused when you're feeling overwhelmed and have to make a decision, or you're going out with people that might make you a little stressed, what you should be doing is taking a breath through your stomach, taking a few deep breaths, and just pause and let the oxygen infuse throughout your whole body. You will feel a change in your physiological state if you do 5 or 6 slow breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Then you can sort of look at what's going on in your life. But the fact is most people are trying to make decisions about their life in not an optimal state. They're feeling overwhelmed and stressed out. And so first thing to do is to pause, recognize that you want to make a change, take a few deep breaths. And then if you are so inspired, go find my book at the website or join the course and really make a change in your life, because it doesn't take a lot to start making a change. You just have to decide that that's what you want to do.
Well, an interesting kicker I want to talk about as we continue here is making those changes in one's life. That's the one constant in the universe. And of course, that's also part of this program. As it changes, it grows, as it evolves. We put new stuff out on that smorgasbord table for you to partake in. And we hope that you will as you continue listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for being with us. We are with Dr. Mark Halperin and his Coherence Revolution, the title of the book, the title of the website. Of course, you need to add .com to that. But you can also get yourself a free copy by listening, because you've been listening to this program, or watching on YouTube by putting /2022 at the end of that. I have gone to that site as we've been talking, and I've got the book now, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But there's also an audio element to this as well. Is that right?
Not of the book. The course is a live Zoom. It's an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half Zoom that we're going to do once a week. And each week you're going to go into not only learning how to do heart math, but there's really fun breakout rooms where you'll be involved in all different types of activities, just to open your eyes to how the words you use affect your emotional state, how the way that you feel affect, the changing your emotional state. You can start to practice that. We give you time to do that. We also do a really cool exercise at, I think it's on week 4, where we bring the senses together. And I've got a track of music. And the music has about 15 different tracks of all different kinds, from drummers in Japan to classical music to rock to country. You name it, every genre is there. Mm-hmm. And we have people finger painting for a half an hour listening to this track of music. And you've got maybe different smells going on in the background. And you're essentially setting yourself up in a sensory way, so that you're using all of your senses to see how different music changes your emotional state. And it's a really fun exercise because you're finger painting and you're really going through the music. And so we do all kinds of things like this over the 6 weeks as you're learning heart math, and we're getting into subconscious beliefs. And I'm doing little bits of a lot of different things, so that at the end of the 6 weeks, you will have had a taste of just so many different ways to change your physiological state. So hopefully it's a lot of fun for people, and they're going to learn a lot along the way, and they're going to learn how to do heart math and in the moment change their emotional state.
Coherencerevolution.com /2022, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I have dubbed this year, and this year only, in the decade of perfect vision, this year is Deuces Wild. Translated, opportunities abound. And we hope that you will take advantage of them during this year, only because deuces are wild. But that doesn't mean that opportunities will discontinue to abound in 2023 and beyond. But hey, we're just playing with the numbers, okay? Deuce is wild. Get out there and participate in those opportunities as you continue listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are so pleased to have Dr. Mark Halpern with us here on the program to talk about the Coherence Revolution, and the book entitled Coherence Revolution. And you've said some very interesting things, especially in light of words that we use. Now, I have been saying for decades that words have power. And I got into a debate with somebody during one of the political campaigns about things that were said. And they said, "Oh, Richard, you're so naive. Come on. It doesn't mean anything. It's just politics." And I thought about that. And this goes back to the whole aspect of being coherent. I said, that doesn't make any sense. Because this individual who's saying these words that I have a problem with has an intent. Intention, you and I would agree that intention is extremely important. So this person has an intention to get elected to this particular office. Well, why? Why? Well, because they want to have that power and that control, that decision-making ability and so forth. So they have an intention to get into that office. So they will say and or do just about anything to get that position. So that means that the words that they are using are intentional, intentional. And that's one of the reasons why during the 2016 campaign nationally, I had a real problem. It wasn't politics. It wasn't the policies of this individual. It was the words they were saying and the intent with which they were saying them. I said, I don't want somebody like that in that position. I had that in school. I don't like bullies. And so let's talk a little bit about that, about why it is so important to be so, I don't want to say necessarily careful, and I don't want to overuse the word intention, but to be so intentional about the words that you choose to use.
Do you know who Masaru Emoto is?
I do. Is he not the Japanese gentleman who
Hidden Messages in Water?
In water, yes.
And
fascinating.
He basically, in the first time he did it, he took a group of students down to a lake by where they were, and they took back these water glasses of water and they froze them. And they found all kinds of different things. In other words, they had different glasses of water and they'd frozen them. And what they found was that depending upon the words either said to the glass, literally speaking to the glass, or they'd write a word on the glass, different beautiful crystals would form or not form. So when they wrote the word love on this glass, beautiful crystals would form. And when they wrote the word hate, no crystals would form. And he's got now volumes of books where he compared hard rock music to, Elvis Presley, to the Beatles, and different words and different ways of saying things. And essentially the message was the words carry a vibration, and those words can affect the cellular activity in water. And human beings are made up of 70-80% water. Yeah. And so we are perceiving the vibration of the way people speak to us. So in one of the exercises in my course, people go into a breakout room and we give each other permission, because I want you to feel it. And so we give each other permission to say things to people that we don't know. And one of the things is you're going to look right in the camera and you're going to stare at someone and you're going to say, I hate you. And boy, even though you knew it was coming, it doesn't feel so good to hear it. And the opposite is, I love you. I appreciate you. You're a great person. You don't even know the person, but just hearing those words feels amazing. Yeah. And the idea is that you can feel the intention behind someone's words. And you go out and just experiment with this. When you're around different people, the words they use, the intention behind it, you can feel it. And so I think that you're right. You should be very intentional in the way you speak to your loved ones, the way you speak to people you don't know. When I'm with my patients, I'm very intentional about the way I speak, because your words can have a direct impact on their physiological state. And, I have people that will come into my office and I may not have done much that day in terms of my adjustment with them. Maybe it was just one small thing I adjusted, but our interaction goes beyond that. If I've given them, maybe I've recognized that person's been a little down. Sometimes I'll just give them a bit of a pick me up and tell them how proud I am of them. I'm just their chiropractor. I'm not their parent. But I'm proud of them. And you can see the way they walk out of the office. It's a whole different person. Their shoulders are back, they're standing up, and they feel appreciated and they feel loved. And that changes their entire day. So I think that you're right. The way you speak to people or speak to anybody, it can affect those around us. And so it's very important to watch the way you speak to people and also choose your words very intentionally.
Yeah. I'm just so amazed. Somebody said to me not long ago, came up to me and said, I want to show you something. I want to show you something because you insulted me earlier today. And I'm going, and to this particular person, I would never do that. They're too important to me. I would never. And if I said something that they took as insulting, I'm unaware of it because they never brought it up at the time. So I said, well, wait a minute, when did I insult you? And I was rather indignant about it. I was maybe borderline offended by the fact that they were accusing me of insulting them, because I don't want to do that to this person. Well, this person got indignant back to me and said, oh, never mind, and walked off. So they never did show me what it was they were going to show me. If this person had just come up to me and just said, I want to show you something. And then maybe after showing me, they could have said something cute and funny and lighthearted in that regard. Then that would have been fine. I didn't know whether this person was playing. And they were just playing around when they said, because you insulted me this morning. But I thought that was strange. And we since, rectified all of that and we're fine. But, it's really interesting how sometimes the littlest of things can sort of set us off. And that's real important because there's that difference between being incoherent and coherent. And the difference is reacting as opposed to acting, if you will. And by the way, in my acting class with my dear friend Ramona, who is no longer with us on this plane, I went through one of her acting classes and she would tell us when we were doing a scene where there was a lot of anger and frustration, and she wanted that to come out, she would have us turn to the person that we were going to be acting with and say to them, ask them, do I have your permission to attack you in this script?
Right.
And obviously the answer would be yes. And if it was no, well, then she would probably choose someone else, I'm sure. But usually we would give permission. We say, sure, because we knew this was just acting. But I thought that was really important when I heard her do that. And it's not necessarily, okay, Mark, can I have your permission to insult you and just belittle you and all of that right now? Can I do that? Can I have your permission to do that? Because your beard, careful now, watch out, careful, because I got one too. Intention is really important, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And you've said a few times in this in our conversation about religion and about sort of the messages from religion.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the Global Coherence Initiative. I'm not sure if you know exactly how it all started, but it's fascinating to me. September 11th, 2001, the planes hit the building. HeartMath had researchers around the globe monitoring the Earth's electromagnetic field. I believe different points along the globe, they had a couple of researchers joining other researchers. And on that day, there was a blip in the Earth's electromagnetic field. And the blip was at the same frequency as the human heart. And so what they came to the theory was that there was enough people with the emotion of grief looking at their television sets that it actually changed the Earth's electromagnetic field.
Yeah.
And so from that day on, the Global Coherence Initiative sort of was born, with the theory being that if we all held the same emotion at the same time, we could fix the ozone, we could fix the climate change, we could fix all the problems of the Earth simply by holding the emotion of love.
Yeah.
And so it dawned on me that perhaps that every religion and spiritual teacher that I've been made aware of, maybe they're all saying the same thing, that the power of love can heal. And that if we all really spread love, not only would we affect ourselves and our community, but we can literally save the planet. And it really is intriguing to me that there is research being done on this right now, and that it's not just a thought anymore. This is a theory that's trying to be proved, and they're working on it. So to me, that's just a fascinating way of looking at the world, that if we all put out a little bit more love, not only are we affecting ourselves and our loved ones, but we literally could save the planet. And I just think that's a wonderful concept.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I remember hearing that story from one of the representatives that we had on following 9/11, probably a couple of years. And they actually said that blip began to appear maybe, I want to say, upwards of 15 minutes prior to the first plane hitting the building. In other words, it was as if the planet knew that something, didn't know what, was about to happen. And that to me also is fascinating.
Yes.
That there is almost a sort of detector, if you will, of future events. Again, not knowing what those future events are, but that something monumental is about to happen. We'd prefer it to be something of a a loving thing, but we can't control those things. Again, this is, to me, it's fascinating. And I actually want to ask you about this before we wrap this program up. And this program, by the way, for those of you who are listening and watching, is called Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are here talking with Dr. Mark Halperin, and we are talking about the Coherence Revolution. I want to ask you, we're talking about how our energies go out and so forth. And it influences and not infects. I don't want to affects others. But that doesn't mean that their free will is being usurped, because they can still choose to stay in that cranky, angry, hateful, bitter state if they choose to do so. That's entirely up to them. So it's no guarantee that we're going to change the world for the better, but we stand a far sight better chance of changing the world for the better for everyone by being in a more loving and peaceful state. Talk to us about that versus, again, a conversation I've been having time and time again of late about free will versus what some people believe is our predestined future, if you will.
Well, I mean, it depends on, there's so many different ways of looking at it. From a quantum model, if you're quantum physics, time is, very arbitrary. But when I look at how we affect the world, the people around us, I almost look at learning heart math as my superpower, because as you're practicing it, you can project it outwards, and you can start to affect other people around you. And, I sometimes, let's say I'm out for dinner. I've had, there was this one instance that I can remember. We were at a table, and there was, the waiter was having obviously a hard day, and the waiter was not really treating us well and was making quite a few mistakes. And I thought, either I'm going to call the manager over, or I'm going to practice heart math. And what I'm going to do is, without anybody knowing, I'm just going to send love out to this guy. And so sure enough, about 5 minutes later, he comes over to the table and he says, I just wanted to apologize to you. I've been having a really tough day. I didn't mean to take it out on this table, but thank you for your patience, and the rest of the meal, will be much smoother. And I just remember in my mind thinking, I created that because I shared this with him. Now, did I take away his free will? No. But what I probably did is my electromagnetic field interacted with his.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it made him a little bit more coherent. Maybe that created a space for him to rethink his behavior. But
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was still up to him to choose how he behaved. But if I can impart a little bit of balance into his life without him knowing it, I don't see a problem with that. You're not doing anything for mind control, but you certainly will affect his physiological state.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, two examples I have. One has to do with a situation where I was involved in a non-injury auto accident that totaled my Volvo. And it was between a Volvo and a BMW. Now, I don't know if his vehicle was totaled or repaired. All I know is that I was then able to buy a truck. But here's the point. I was shaken up by the whole thing. I was in the right. Not that that really matters. That he made a tactical error, and he's going to have to pay for that down the road. But we go through the preliminaries. The police show up. We're going through the whole thing. I make my phone calls, he makes his phone calls, and the police are there. And as we're wrapping things up, and I am, fortunately the vehicle is, I can drive it away, but it's still toast. I walked up to the gentleman intentionally in front of the police officer. And I extended my hand and I said, I want to shake your hand. And I want to say, I'm glad that the two of us are okay. Now, I want you to go out and make it a better day than this, because I'm going to. Because I'm going to come across, this is a small town, Santa Barbara, and I'm going to come across this guy somewhere down the road one of these days. And the last thing I want is that energy, that following us around. And it wasn't necessarily his fault or mine. It's just something that happened. And we learned from it. And now let's move on, and let's make this a better place and a better day. And we did. And of course, we got our truck that we've been wanting for years. The second example, very briefly, I got sucked into the political tidal wave in September of 2016. The last thing I wanted, I was trying to stay as far away from it as I could, but I got sucked in anyway. It took me 6 months to get unsucked, just so you know. But I went through 4 phases with the man who then became president at that time. And as I shared with you earlier, and the first phase it was probably the hardest to utter out loud. And I had to utter it out loud. And that was, thank you, teacher. Oh, I don't want to call him a teacher, for teaching me how not to behave.
Right.
The second phase was, a few months later, I forgive you, but more importantly, I forgive myself for allowing myself to be drawn into the quagmire. The third phase was, from a very heart-centered place, what is it that you're so afraid of that makes you behave and speak the way that you do? And then the fourth phase that one of my guests shared with me was, again, coming from that same heart-centered space, 3 words, and they have to be genuinely meant. That this person has the right to be here just like I do. I love you. You're a human being, and personalities aside, I love you. I want what's best. I want the best for you, just like I want the best for me. And that's and someone even said, on this program, even said, what if the news media had responded in exactly the opposite? I'm not saying embracing, but not attacking. What if they had not attacked and just presented the information? What do you think would have happened? Well, we'll never know at this particular point. But, it's like what we've both experienced in our lives. When you go at it from a position, an intention of love and compassion and peace, guess what comes back? Love and compassion and peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is the coherent revolution right there.
Yes. Well put.
This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you for being with us. Dr. Mark Halperin is my guest, and I have three final questions that I love to ask my guests. But
Sure.
first, I want to thank you for the Coherent Revolution. It's a book. It's available at coherentrevolution.com. Put a slash
Coherence.
2022.
Coherence
Coherence,
Revolution.
not
Yes.
coherent, coherence. Coherence.
Yes.
Okay. Coherencerevolution.com/2022, where you can get a free copy of the book, as well as the audio tracks, I believe, that go along with it.
Well, it's a live course. They get 50% off the live course.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. And music, that's another area we could talk about. Maybe we'll have you back and talk more about how music can influence our individual coherence factor, if
Yes.
you will. I think it'd be
Absolutely.
fantastic to do. But thank you for being with us here on the program. This has been fabulous.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It's a great conversation.
I want to remind our listeners and our viewers as well that we are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and our special edition of Tell Me Your Story, 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. And we hope that you will listen to those broadcasts, and we hope that you will do so online at richarddugan.com. The podcasts are available at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, I think it's Burberry, not Blueberry, Burberry, as well as iHeart and many other locations on the internet, as well as watching these interviews on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Tell Me Your Story. Just look for the guy with the black hat. And we also encourage you, if you are of a mind to do so and you're able to, we'd love to have your financial support for this program. Just go to PayPal. It's for your security as well as ours. And when you put in the email address to send the funds to, use richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. We'd greatly appreciate any amount. You know what? We'll even take kind words. As a matter of fact, I was listening to the Wednesday edition, and I got a phone call from someone who wanted to have me ask the guest a question, thinking it was live. And I had to tell him, oh, I'm sorry, but they're not live. This is a recorded program. But I do believe that the answer to your question is yes, and so forth. We'll take energetic support, because that felt really good. For her to compliment me and the program and the guest. Great guest, really loved the subject. It was perfect for this time. So, we'll take energetic support as well. Financial support is also greatly appreciated. And do participate in the decade of 2020, the decade of perfect vision, as well as the year of the deuce is wild, where opportunities abound, folks. Spend time going within and listening to that still small voice. Another area that we could have gone into as well, Dr. Mark Halperin. And to that end, let us go to the three final questions in the lightning round of the game show Tell Me Your Story, where we ask these three questions of all of our guests. You may have addressed them to some degree during the program, but I like to ask them directly. The first of those three is, who is Mark Halperin?
I am one of everybody. I am everybody who is trying to just get through life. And the fact is, I'm trying to do it in an inspired way. So I am someone who's looking for the best in life and to create the most inspired life I can for myself and those I love. And that's what I want other people to do as well.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
Well, I think Coherence Revolution, our goal is to help millions of people globally to self-regulate and change their emotional state. If I can even affect a small change in how people view the world around them and to be able to manage their lives in a way that doesn't stress them out, we've done a good job. So to get inspired and to have people live an inspired and renewed life.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
My life's purpose is to explore and have no boundaries on my journey. Every time I think I understand what my purpose is, it changes. And so really it's to have an open heart and an open mind and to just go where the path leads me and not to have too many doors or too many things that I'm going to say no to, so that I can just see what life brings. My ultimate goal is to just experience everything the world has to offer. And when you have an open heart and an inspiration behind you, the chance of you having a pretty fun journey is going to be a little bit more assured.
Well, again, I thank you so much for joining us. And by the way, I used to see a chiropractor on a regular basis back in Phoenix, and it was in trade for some other work I was doing for her. I got to tell you, I believe it or not, I enjoyed those adjustments. Uh,
Yes.
the popping sound was a little disconcerting at first, but I'm going,
Yeah.
oh boy, I can hardly wait to get there
Yes.
and be popped.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, it really is. I really enjoy it. I thank you again for joining us. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to lol.